this town hall that features our Congressman Mike Thompson. This is an unusual town hall, not sponsored by the Congressman, but sponsored by community groups. We'd like to thank the Carquinez Patriotic Resistance and Benicia Indivisible for all their hard work. And I'd like to introduce Steve Young, who will make some remarks for the council.
Thank you. I'm Steve Young. I'm the Vice Mayor of Benicia. Mayor Elizabeth Patterson was supposed to be here. She's stuck in Sacramento doing some work. She sends her condolences, but this gives me the opportunity to thank you personally for showing up and supporting democracy. I also would like to recognize, I know he's here, Councilman Alan Schwartzman way in the back. Supervisor Monica Brown in the front. And having worked with both Benicia Indivisible and the Carquinez Patriotic Resistance on this event, I can tell you that there was an awful lot of work that got us to this point. And I think they deserve another round of applause for their work. Councilman Tom Campbell just walked in. And finally, I want to thank Congressman Mike Thompson, of course. This is his third town hall of the day. And so I'm sure you'll give him your polite attention and ask him a lot of good questions. And let's get this thing going. Thank you.
5 years of public service, first as a state senator and then as a congressman. He is a native of Napa County, a Vietnam veteran with a strong record on the environment, healthcare, animal rights, and gun violence. So I'd like to introduce you our Congressman Mike Thompson.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the nice introduction. Thanks for the invitation to be here with you. And thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. This is a great crowd. I'm very appreciative that you have taken the interest in what's going on in our country today, and I couldn't think of a better place to be tonight than with you here this evening. Somebody asked me when I came in, they said, boy, you know, there's all this renewed interest in town hall meetings. What do you think about that? I think it was the media. And I said, well, I'm jazzed about it, quite honestly, because I really like town hall meetings. I think it's important for members of Congress to come home to their district, to meet with their constituents, to hear what the constituents are concerned about, and figure out how to take those concerns back to Washington and work on solutions. And I've had, throughout my time in elected office, I've had a bunch of town hall meetings, but I've got to tell you, over the last few years, I stopped doing them. Not because I don't like to do them, but there was just no interest. Nobody cared. Nobody came to the town hall meetings. I did the telephone town hall meetings, and those were great. You'd get 20,000 people in the district on the phone, and we could monitor how long they stayed, and that was good. But the real town hall meetings, come out to the gymnasium or the Veterans Hall, people just were not interested in coming. I remember the last one I had in Benicia was at the Veterans Hall, and I think we had about 8 people there. So if there's one thing good that's happened since November, it's that there's a renewed interest in our country, in our government, and in civic engagement. So I want to thank you very, very much for showing your commitment to civic engagement by being here tonight. And I want you to know that it's important and that it helps. It's important that members of Congress know what it is their constituents are concerned about, what they're thinking, what are the questions that they bring to these town hall meetings. And the evidence has been pretty clear. You know, there's some pretty interesting times right now in Washington. And one of the first things that the new Congress and the new administration set out to do was repeal the Affordable Care Act, and which would have been tragic. It would have taken health care away from about 24 million people. It would have cost California about $20 billion. It would have imposed a senior tax. The older you are, the more you would pay for health care. It would have cost about 300,000 jobs in California. And people across the country came out in droves, and they told their members of Congress they didn't want to have their health care taken away from them. They wanted to keep the Affordable Care Act. And you know what happened? They took it right up to the moment before the vote on the House floor, and then they realized they didn't have the votes. And I want you to know that's because of you and all the other people across the country that spoke out. That was an organic effort. It wasn't me calling you and saying, you've got to oppose this legislation. This was the people saying, we've worked hard and waited long for access to good quality, affordable health care, and you've made some progress, and the last thing we need to do is turn that boat around and head out in the other area. So when you stand up and speak out for what's right, it works. It does have an impact. Now, the bad news is, I heard today, the bad news is I heard today that the Republican majority in the House believes they have a couple of amendments to this bill that would make it, that would allow it to gain the support in the House to pass. And I don't know what that amendment could be. I guess they're going to make it worse, I guess, because the people that are holding it up, remember, the Republicans have a majority in the House. They could pass anything they want. And we know they've passed repeal the Affordable Care Act 68 times already when President Obama was in office. So they could pass whatever they want, but it became a fight within on their side of the aisle on the Affordable Care Act, and that's when they abandoned it. So what the amendment would do, I would assume, would have to make it worse, because it was the Freedom Caucus, the extreme right wing, that didn't think their bill repealing the Affordable Care Act went far enough. So as successful as we were, the fight has just begun. They say they may have a vote as early as next week on doing this, and I'm against anything that takes health care away from 24 million people. I'm against anything that says if you have a pre-existing condition, you need to be able to get health care, and they want to take that away, and that's not right, and we need to fight hard to make sure that we keep that. There are a number of things going on in Washington that, and I'm not going to talk too long because I want to get to your questions, but I was asked specifically to talk a little bit about the environment, immigration, and education. So there are a number of things going on in Washington that I think would be out of our wheelhouse, things that we would be against. And those three that the organizers had designated for tonight's meeting are certainly tops amongst many of the issues that I think the current administration and the current majority are incongruent with our beliefs here in California's 5th Congressional District. On the environment, I got a news flash for this president. Climate change is not a hoax. Climate change is very, very real. And we need to be doing everything we can to get in front of it to make sure that we can diminish the negative impact associated with climate change, and we need to be smart about it. And being smart about addressing climate change has a real positive side other than helping to save the environment. It's also good for jobs. And California, and our district in particular, is a leader in renewable energy jobs. It's a leader in green jobs, and we can really work well to put the country back to work. And we need to not abandon our effort in this regard. And you know, you don't have to look any further than our district to see the impact of climate change. Highway 37, drive from Vallejo over to Sears Point or to Sonoma Raceway. The scientists have already told us that they think there's 5 spots on that road that are going to go underwater in the next X number of years because of sea level rise. And that's expensive, and it's very, very real. And you know, we need to build a new Highway 37 anyway. I could spend a whole town hall meeting on that. But the fact of the matter is, I think it shows you really very clear the impacts, the very real impacts of climate change. The House, they've already, I say they because I didn't vote for it, but they've already taken action, and the President has signed an executive order to just diminish the stream protections that we've been able to put in place, and to give kind of a free pass to the coal industry to do mountaintop mining. And you know what happened is they mine those mountaintops, and everything else falls into the streams and the river and creates major environmental pollution problems. And the other thing I can tell you is the coal industry is not coming back like the coal industry was, and there's no such thing as clean coal. So the idea that we can just expunge the regulations that protect our streams, and therefore it makes the coal stuff good, is nonsense. And we ought to recognize that and make sure that we hold our ground in regard to the important environmental gains that we've made. And the same thing goes for the CAFE standards on automobiles. We've made tremendous gains in this country, and California has been a leader. And the idea that this new president can come in and say, you know, we're going to reverse the miles per gallon requirements for automobile manufacturers, I think is foolish. I think it's going to cost us a lot of progress that we've made, and I think it's going to bring about a lot of dirty air and dirty environment. On immigration, I can tell you there's not another topic that I hear more about in our district than the issue with immigration, even today and before today. Immigration reform is something that Congress should have done years ago. I think we really missed the boat on this, but it's something that we shouldn't stop working on. We need to have comprehensive immigration reform and fix this process that is almost solely responsible for the fact that we have 11 million undocumented individuals living in this country today. That shouldn't be the case. We should have an immigration system that is navigable, that people who want to come to this country to work or to visit or to play can do so, and when they want to go back, they can go back. The idea that we've just blocked everything up and then we blame those immigrants who are here for our failure, I think is really misplaced. And right now today, people in our district today are damn scared. I don't know how else to tell you. I had a friend of mine who lives in Santa Rosa. She was born in Cloverdale. Works for a bank in Santa Rosa, told me the other day, she said, you know, Mike, I was born in Cloverdale. I said, I know that. And she says, and I don't leave my house without my passport. I had a meeting this week. We actually had a town hall meeting on immigration last night in Napa with a full house attendance. People wanted to know what their rights are. People wanted to know how the community can work together to make sure that our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers are protected. And that earlier that day, I had a roundtable with my colleague Jared Huffman, who represents the other side of Sonoma County in Sonoma County, in Cotati. We had the meeting. We had about 45 people representing every different community of interest within Sonoma County. Everything from law enforcement to the agricultural industry, the hospitality industry, the Chamber of Commerce, education, healthcare, all about immigration. And some of the things that are happening are really frightening. The idea that parents are not signing their kids up for kindergarten because they're afraid that somehow that's going to get out and they're going to be subject to deportation. The fact that parents are disenrolling themselves and their children from health care in Sonoma County because they're afraid that somehow somebody is going to get a hold of those records and they're going to be sought out and deported. What that means is, that means we're going to have an uneducated community and we're going to have a sick community. And I don't care what your documentation status is. you will be affected by ignorance and by illness. And that's not good for our community any way, shape, or form. And the idea that public policy should be based on some silly campaign rhetoric is troubling to me. This whole idea about the wall, and we all heard it during the campaign, and I understand who won the campaign, and I understand it was a campaign promise, but it was a foolish campaign promise. You can't build a wall across our southern border. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work for a number of reasons. It doesn't work because we have ongoing commerce across our southern border, and that interrupts that ongoing commerce. We have agricultural entities on our southern border who ranch and farm on both sides of the border. If you build a wall through their property, number one, you have to take their property by eminent domain, and number two, it disrupts their entire agricultural operation. Number three, if you build a 10-foot wall, it is an economic boom for the people who make 11-foot ladders. And if you build a wall that's higher than any ladder, you're going to have people tunneling underneath. We know this happens. We see it right now. We have a good border security system going on right now. We can always benefit by increased resources, both personnel and technology. That's something that should be considered. But the idea that we're going to build a wall and bill somebody else to pay for it is absolute ridiculous. And we already saw that. The president's budget came out last month, and what was in it? $4 billion of our U.S. taxpayer dollars to go to start a wall that experts tell us will cost between $20 and $40 billion to construct. That wasn't $4 billion that we're asking another government for. It was $4 billion of our tax dollars. There's better ways to secure our border, and we can do that easily. The other big immigration issue is the tactics of ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And there's some huge concerns with that amongst the different counties. One of the things that I want to make sure that happens is that there is communications when ICE comes into one of our counties to make sure that we don't get sideways with local law enforcement, and to make sure that local law enforcement knows what's going on. And this is a huge problem if ICE comes in, takes someone out of the county, and then their family reports them as missing. Local law enforcement has to treat that as a missing person. And it's a lot better for public safety and for public resources to be able to know what's going on. So if it is an ICE extraction, that's not somebody who is missing, but someone who has been put into the custody of ICE. The local police in our congressional district have worked for years to make sure they build strong relationships between the immigrant community. That's important for us from a community safety perspective. It's important so the immigrant community knows they can cooperate with law enforcement. If there's a crime, they're witnesses, or they turn it into law enforcement. And if you drive this wedge between them with the community police, it's a huge problem. And local law enforcement in our district tell me it's going to create bigger problems. It's going to be harder to investigate crimes. Crimes won't be turned into the police department. There's going to be a high rate of violence, people running from law enforcement because they're afraid that they may be undocumented, and a small crime, or just the fact that they're a witness to a crime, they won't want to participate, or they're going to be apprehended. So our local law enforcement is very worried about that. And just FYI, they're also very worried about the fact that ICE, the only federal law enforcement agency that I know of, comes into a town with their vests or their jackets on with big bold letters that say police, and then ICE's little letters underneath. And local cops in our district tell me that's really hurting their efforts to build relationships, and in turn hurting community safety, public safety. So we're working to try and figure out how to deal with that. And then lastly, I'll just touch briefly on education. I think it is extremely important that we do everything that we can to ensure that every person in our society has access to a quality education. The opportunity to get an education should not be out of anyone's reach. And I think that starts in K-12. Actually starts in preschool, because we know that for every dollar that we spend in preschool, we get like $8 back. So it should start at the very lowest level and go all the way through K-12 and into higher education. The big education issue today in regard to higher education is the cost of higher ed. There's a couple things that I think that Congress can do. We can start by fully funding the Pell Grants, the grants that allow people to get a college education. And there's two types of Pell Grant. There's the regular Pell Grant and there's the year-round Pell Grant. And I think it would be short-sighted to jettison the year-round Pell Grants, because a lot of people, it's harder to get classes now in college, and people need to go year-round in order to get their education behind them and to move into the workforce. And the faster they get into the workforce, the faster they're going to be full participants in our community. And that's another reason why the whole issue of higher ed affordability is important. If student loan rates are so high that kids get out of college with a 6-digit student loan, that means it's going to be longer for them not only to pay off their student loan, but longer for them to become a full vested member of our community, i.e. buy a car, buy a house, invest in the community. So it really hurts the entire community, and we ought to be doing everything we can to lower the cost of those student loans and figure out how to make it more affordable for any student who wants to pursue higher education to be able to do it. I know that I would not have been able to get my college degree if it were not for the GI Bill. I took full advantage of the GI Bill, and in addition to that, because I was a little slower than I should have been, I ran out of GI Bill, and I went back and got an extension so I could finish my graduate school through the GI Bill, and that's the only reason, or one of the only reasons I was able to get a college degree. And we should be as creative as we possibly can to try and figure out opportunities to get people educated into school and to be able to develop themselves the best that they possibly can. And I think one way to do that was provide tuition offsets for individuals who go into public service. There's no question that we need more people in public service, and this is everything from AmeriCorps to the teaching profession, police officers, health providers, anything that shows a return to the community. We ought to be looking to figure out how to make that happen. And then lastly, I know I wasn't asked to talk about it, but I think it has something to do with education, because every student on every campus, just like every member in every community, needs to be safe. And safety and public safety, I think, is extremely important. And for those of you who don't know, one of the jobs that I do in Washington is I'm the chairman of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. And the task force came about after the terrible murderous massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School 4 years ago in Connecticut. And I took this issue on, and I have a task force that I put together, and we've been working across party lines. The main piece of legislation that I am pushing is a bill that would require anyone who purchases a firearm through the commercial sale would be required to have a background check before they get the gun. Just think how crazy that is. We want to make sure that the wrong people don't get guns. And I believe in the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner. I will fight to the death to preserve the Second Amendment and your right to own a firearm, provided you're not a criminal and you're not dangerously mentally ill. And the only way, and I don't think I'd be surprised if anybody here thought that criminals or the dangerously mentally ill should be able to have a gun. But the only way that you can make sure that they don't get guns is to check to see if they're a criminal or dangerously mentally ill. And many states don't have that requirement for purchasing firearms. Every state, if you buy a gun at a licensed gun store, you have to have a background check. But you can go to the pawn shop, you can go to the gun store, you can go on the internet in many states and buy them. And the people that do that oftentimes are people who are criminals, who are dangerously mentally ill, and who shouldn't have guns. So I think that's a very important part of education in our community. So with that, I'll be quiet and take questions.
The wall that Trump wants to build would cost between $20 to $40 billion. A lot of that money is getting cut in the proposed budget for McGovern-Dole International Food for Education, Federal Education Opportunity Grants, a program that gives financial aid to college students, and Senior Community Service Employment Program, a program that helps low-income seniors to receive job training. These are all important programs. What measures can be taken to prevent the construction of the wall and to save the funds for other organizations?
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to get down here if that's okay. The money in the budget for the wall, I think, is only part of it. There's a couple of things that I think have to be considered. Number one, there has to be a strong commitment for education, and I believe a strong commitment for public education. I think the president's choice for Secretary of Education was a bad choice. And the idea that you would take money away from public schools and redirect it to private schools, I think, is a huge problem. And please don't get me wrong. There's some great charter schools, there's some great private schools, and we ought to do all we can to support them, but not at the expense of public education. The difference between public education and all of the others is that public education doors are open to everyone. Absolutely everyone. And nowhere is that probably more apparent than children who have developmental disabilities. And the school opens the doors and educates everybody. And it is important if your parents are 100% for education and do your homework with you every night and take you to all the stuff, or if sadly your parents aren't involved, you need a public school that will be devoted to you and to your education. So not only do we need to not fund the wall, and I'd like to actually take that separate and apart. I'm going to do everything I can to stop the wall from being funded. I think it's a ridiculous expenditure, and I think I outlined that pretty well. But we need to make a commitment to education. And when I say we, I mean all of us. We need to make sure that everybody in every community understands the importance, understands the value of education, and make sure that it's a priority if you live in Benicia, if you live in Napa, or if you live in South Carolina. That needs to be the word of the land. So I'll keep working on it. I know that my colleagues are with me every day. I'm not on the education committee, but every day they're working on this stuff. And there's a commitment, at least on my side of the aisle. And I'll be fair. It's not just Democrats, and Republicans understand the importance and the value of education as well. And we all need to work together and work across party lines to make sure that we have as much access to education as possible. I can tell you that when I guess it's been 10 years ago now, when we, the Democrats, were in charge, one of the issues that we took on was the interest rates for student loans. If you remember what was happening, there was the proverbial middleman who was making a lot of money on these financing these student loans, and we took them out of the picture, and we reduced the money. We took the savings. I believe it was either 65 or 85 billion dollars in savings, and we put that back into the grant programs for higher education. So not only did the student loan rates lower, but they also the savings went to right back into education to provide more opportunity.
How do the high schoolers of California prevent the slashing of the U.S. Department of Education funding that will be going towards a private school voucher system?
Well, along the same lines, I think you need to stand up, you need to speak out, you need to make sure that everybody knows that this is important. You know, you guys have a voice. You may be a junior in high school, but believe me, you are vested in our community. It's your future that's on the line. And if educational opportunities are shut off for the kids of today, it's going to be a very, very ugly world tomorrow. And I'm so impressed by the students that I see, and I meet with students throughout our district on a very, very regular basis. I visit schools a lot, and I'm very impressed with what I see. And we need to make sure we pave the way so you guys can get the higher education that you want. And it's expensive. There's no question about it. But I remember when I was in college, there was a bumper sticker. It said, you think education's expensive, try ignorance. And let me tell you, it's real true. We need to be able to spend the money, spend the tax dollars to provide the opportunity for our young people to be the leaders of tomorrow that I know they can be.
H.R. 610, it's in the House, right?
I don't know. What is the bill?
It's to distribute federal funds for elementary and secondary education in the form of vouchers for eligible students, which you've talked about, and to repeal a certain rule relating to nutrition standards in the schools. I'm wondering if you know the status of that particular bill.
I don't. I don't know the bill, but let me just give you my position on food programs in the school first. And I think that they're essential, especially in areas, and you know they're weighted, so it is dependent upon the economic status of the community. And we're a pretty doggone rich country, and if we can't afford to help poor kids get a meal in their belly before we try and educate them, it's a pretty sad commentary. And we know that kids learn better when they're fed. We know that kids learn better when they're healthy, and we should be doing everything we can to make sure kids are fed and healthy and educated. As far as voucher goes, I think I was pretty clear on that. I think that we need to fund public schools. We need to make them the best that we possibly can, and we need to show a commitment to those public schools and not allow kids to take their money and go somewhere else. Because I mentioned when I spoke to your issue that some parents are better equipped than others for a whole multitude of reasons. And if you set up a system whereby the smart parents could take their kids and put them all in the best schools, pretty soon you're left with just, the ruins. And that's not going to work. We cannot afford to have an uneducated population. And a program like that, I think, tees up a situation where a bigger percentage of our students would be uneducated. So if there are problems in a school, we ought to figure out how to focus on the school and those problems and fix it, not run away from it and not leave half the kids stranded in an educational desert while the kids of more well-to-do or smarter parents get to go to the oasis of education.
How can you guarantee the safety of the citizens of not only California but also of the U.S. From radical groups and terrorism without excluding entire groups of people and taking away their freedom of religion? For example, the Syrian refugees and the recent Muslim ban.
I don't think you have to ban people from the United States in order to have a secure country and a strong national defense. I can tell you, and you were correct, The executive order that was signed by the president and later found to be unconstitutional was a Muslim ban. Make no mistake about that. It was not a travel ban, it was a Muslim ban. And it was found to be unconstitutional. They're going to take another crack at it. I don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to try and reframe it. But what we need to do is make sure that people who come to our country are properly vetted, properly screened. Now, as far as refugees go, anybody want to take a guess at how long it takes for a refugee to be screened before they can come here? Yeah, a little over 2 years, about 2.5. And it's not an easy situation. And we've had, in our district, we've had direct experience with this. And I know because I have a constituent from Napa whose interpreter in Afghanistan was trying to come over on the refugee program. And after 3 years of vetting, my constituent called me and said, hey, this guy saved my life. He saved my life of my men and my platoon, and he's in danger. He worked for us, the United States of America, and if he stays in Afghanistan, eventually he's going to be found and he's going to be killed. Can you do anything about it? And I went to bat for this kid, and we finally, after about 6 months of me working for him, on top of the 2.5 years, we finally got his clearance. He came to the United States of America, and who was the person that said they did a tour in my office here not too long ago? Maybe you saw him, because he worked in my office for a year. He was an Afghanistan-looking guy by the name of Mikey. And I was in the front office. He greeted constituents who came into the office. He took people on tours. And he did marvelous work in the office for about a year. And now he's living in Ohio, and he's doing great things there. So we can make sure we're safe. At the same time, we can uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, and we can be the great country that we are, and we can be respectful of other people coming here.
I've heard reports in the news today about the first dreamer deported in the Trump administration, someone who had legal authorization under Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I also have heard that the behavior of ICE in some cases when they are going to deport someone, as you mentioned earlier, represent themselves as police. And when people ask who it is, they do not say that they're ICE. And what I'd like to know is, how do we hold them accountable? And isn't there some protection? Isn't there some way that they need to behave in a better way and provide rights to people who have them? What do we do to hold them accountable in those instances?
Okay. Thank you. It's an excellent question. It's a timely question. And I can tell you that it's a thorny issue. ICE, under this administration, is not going to be cooperative with you or me. And I know that firsthand, because about 3 weeks ago, we had Secretary Kelly, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security, come in and meet with all the Democrats, our Democratic caucus. And I went up to the microphone. The first guy was up there, and I had a question to ask. And I already told you what it was, this issue of police on their clothing. My local law enforcement tell me that it's creating an unsafe environment on the streets of our district. And I wanted to confront this guy with it. And I had sent him a letter, and he hadn't responded. So I went up to the microphone, and it turned out that there was a little choreographed deal going on that I had to wait for. There were 3 different caucuses that had presentations. And in each instance, he was the most dismissive and the rudest person that I've ever dealt with in a public forum before. And he'd say things like, well, I'm following the law, and if you don't like it, change the law. And somebody raised the issue of them coming into sanctuary areas, specifically a church. And he said, we don't go into churches. And they had a picture of the ICE vehicle on the church grounds, because that picture means nothing to me. We don't go on churches. So when I went up to the microphone, I figured, hey, this is going to be a home run, because I have an issue that he surely will say, that's a great issue. Let me work with my people, see what we can figure out. to make sure that local law enforcement gets the cooperation they need. He listened to me. I said, I have a copy of the letter I sent you. It's signed by, I don't know, 100 of my colleagues. And I said, I'd like to give you a copy of it. And he said, I'll take your letter. And I was at the microphone, and he was from about me to you. So I walked away from the mic with the letter, and I got about this far. And he said, but I'm not doing anything about it. Just like that. Now, I don't expect everybody to agree with me or with my local law enforcement. But I do expect that a fellow public servant would say, let me look at this, let us figure it out. If it's a problem, let's see what we can do to fix it. So I tell you this story because I don't think they're interested in cooperating. They're on a mission. They're going to do what it is they're going to do. Now, however, we're very fortunate given the fact that we live in California. And I know that every local law enforcement agency in our district, and I suspect through most of the state, is understanding of these issues. I know our state legislature is going above and beyond to try and figure out how to mitigate these issues. And I think that in the end, we're going to be able to muddle through most of this. There's a lawsuit against efforts to take funding away from California. I've signed an amicus brief in support of that. I know a number of the other members of our delegation have as well. And we're just going to have to watch these guys, and we're going to have to speak out when there's a problem. Now, we have a regional director at ICE out of San Francisco who I've worked with a lot because she worked for Dianne Feinstein in Washington for years. So our offices have worked together. And I talk to her, my office talks to her a lot. I was with her for about an hour yesterday morning on these issues. They really want to cooperate. They understand the value of cooperating with our local law enforcement, so that will be helpful. We also need to make sure that individuals know their rights. Everybody has rights. Documented, undocumented, the guy next door, the gal across the street. Everybody has rights, and people need to know these rights and be able to act accordingly. And we should do more. I've got printed material on Know Your Rights, and be happy to share that with anybody that would like it. It's good, I think, to have community meetings to talk about what those rights are so everybody knows, and that's what we did last night at the town hall meeting in Napa. I'd be more than willing to participate in a town hall meeting in Benicia or anywhere else in Solano County.
I would like to know what your policies would be to help resolve the immigration problems in a meaningful manner.
Well, I'm a co-author of a number of pieces of legislation. I was a co-author of the piece of legislation that passed the Senate 2 Congresses ago in the last Congress, the comprehensive immigration reform measure that could not get a hearing in the House. And you know what happened in the House. Bob Goodlatte, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, said that the only immigration reform that he was going to entertain is that if you're undocumented, you go back to Mexico and you reapply. And that just doesn't work. The reason that there's so many undocumented people in the United States of America is because the process doesn't work. It needs to be reformed. It needs to be updated. It needs to be fixed. And to send somebody back, it takes, what did we hear last night? I think it takes 22 years to get an application approved if you're in Mexico to become a citizen in the United States of America. So the system doesn't work. It just needs to be fixed.
Hi, I'm Barbara Richardson. This is going to be a little bit off for you, I'm sure. I'm not too clear where you stand on making California a sanctuary city.
Where I stand on making California a sanctuary state. As I said, the legislature is doing legislation now that would, I don't know that it would call California a sanctuary state, but...
Are you working towards that? Is that what you're working towards?
Well, I'm not
Making
in I'm not in the state legislature, I'm in Congress.
Okay.
So, but the state legislature, this would fall into their bailiwick. They're working on legislation that would provide more protection.
It's ICE that is going after these sanctuary cities.
No, ICE is going after certain undocumented individuals. Right.
Where the cities that are offering sanctuary for these undocumented people.
Well, some cities have declared themselves sanctuary cities.
And you agree with them?
Pardon me?
And do you agree with those cities?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. Santa Rosa in our district has declared itself an indivisible city. And the primary reason for doing this is to let the people in the community know that their community stands with them. Whether or not it has any legal standing is probably questionable. Someone could still come in and still do an extraction of an individual, but they're going to do it without the cooperation of the city. And as I said, I think the bigger issue is it's to let folks know that, hey, you're our neighbors, you're our friends, you're part of our local workforce. We stand with you. We are not divisive, and we are not abandoning you.
Even though you're illegal.
Pardon me?
Even though these people are illegal.
Well,
Supporting them being here.
I think you should choose your words better. I think it's offensive to call a person illegal. No, someone might be undocumented, but I think it's inappropriate to call somebody illegal. It's divisive, and we're not trying to be divisive. We're trying to figure out how to bring people together.
Hello, sir. You said that you approve of an approach to fixing energy challenges that uses established energy sources. Does this include the burning of more fossil fuels that we have established are not exactly the best for the environment?
Well, I think what I said was I believe that we ought to look at expanding our use of renewable fuels. And I think there's a lot that could be done in that area, a lot more than what we're doing now. When we did we did the Recovery Act when the economy crashed and we made investments, and I'm the one that carried the legislation to expand solar use, and I think that was a good step. It created a lot of jobs. It provided my legislation provided an investor tax benefit for making the materials that we use here in America. It's one thing to put a solar panel on every roof. It's another thing to put a solar panel on every roof that's made in the United States of America. So that's what we were trying to do. And there's a lot of, there's geothermal, there's wind, there's a lot that we can do, and we ought to really expand that.